Welcome back to the Good Success Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Culler, and today I've got a special guest on the show. His name is Gerald Allen Hennessey out of Seattle, Washington. Gerald, what is going on, my friend? How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Awesome stuff. So what's all the stuff behind you? That's some interesting looking gear that you got there.
I'm here in my office up here in Tacoma, Washington, which is just south of Seattle. And I've got a couple of maps that are a little bit, one of them's older, and then another one's kind of a metallic, old world style of a map. And then
Gotcha.
I've got a family crest behind me and a couple of clocks and gear and stuff.
That's awesome. Man, that's some cool stuff. I'll have to take a look at this sometime.
Nice.
Well, cool. We are absolutely excited to have you on the show today. So Gerald, I actually connected with him on Facebook. So a little bit of a nugget for you guys. If you're ever interested, obviously networking is huge. We talk about networking so much. All the guests that we have on the show talk about networking. We beat that to death. So I think that one thing that people miss out on, Gerald, is virtual networking, right? So oftentimes we look at Facebook like it's a bad thing and the social media and all that stuff, that we're not interactive with each other. But the reality of it is that we connected with each other on Facebook. I took a look at your profile and I was like, man, this guy's got a lot going on. And I think it might be good to connect with him and talk to him on the phone. So we got on a phone call that same day and then scheduled the podcast for today. And that's how it happens. So a little bit of a nugget for you guys. Don't be afraid to virtually network on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or whatever. So, but Gerald, so just a couple things about Gerald. Like I said, he's out of Seattle, Washington, and Gerald has been in real estate for 10 years, since 2016, actually 12 years now, but since 2006, he has been a real estate investor for single family real estate properties over the last 10 years in states that include California, Nevada, Texas, Arizona, Hawaii, and Washington. So he is everywhere on the West Coast. So we're going to have him talk about that on one of the questions that we have here. But Gerald has also done wholesaling, virtual wholesaling, Airbnbs, and many other forms of creative real estate investing. He is the president of Bentley Kensington, Inc., and his wife, Chelsea, is a licensed real estate broker. So that's awesome. I actually got to see a video of her showing off a house or whatever. That was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And then Gerald has 5 children that are born and raised in Seattle. And he actually told me right before we jump on the podcast here, he's got a 6th one on the way, which is exciting, due in January. So that, congratulations. We're excited for you. He said that he's got to leave a legacy, so that's what's going down. So we're excited for him. But we're going to come back around to Gerald here. I got some great questions for him, and you guys won't want to miss this. But before we get into it, if you guys haven't already, make sure you have subscribed to the Good Success Podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, all the podcast platforms. Just go search for us and search Good Success on those platforms. We'll be there. Hit subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you guys do listen to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. We would love to hear your feedback and reviews. 5 stars, 4 stars, whatever you guys feel like, but 5 stars would be awesome. And then the Good Success Mastermind. The next event is coming up February 4 through 8, and we cannot be any more excited than we are right now. And that is going to be in Dallas, Texas at Quest Trust Company's office. A group of amazing individuals, a lot of great people that we have in this group. I'm very excited to get them together again. And now we're going a full week. Tom pushed us to go a full week. So we're going to be doing that and splitting the group into 2. And then that middle day, that Wednesday, we're going to be having the entire Good Success Mastermind group together and lots of networking panels, all kinds of stuff. So if you guys want to learn more about that, go to goodsuccess.com/mastermind. You'll fill out an application there. Let us know a little bit about you. Then you'll jump on a phone call with either myself or Tom, and we'll talk from there. So one more time, that's goodsuccess.com/mastermind is where you can learn more about our mastermind. And then the Community Go-Giver event is coming up June 26, 27, 28. I know it's a little bit away, but we have early bird pricing going on right now. A lot of awesome speakers, some coming back from last year and a couple of new ones that we are very excited about. And this initiative is all about flipping your community and actually impacting your communities, where one of our missions and one of Tom's visions for the company is to flip the entire city of Gary, Indiana, which is already in progress. So you guys won't want to miss out on that. Come see us at our office. We have 80 tickets available. Not right now, but we do have 80 tickets available. That's what we're selling out at. Early bird pricing is going on. You can go to communitygogiver.com to learn more about that, to see. I think we have a promotional video on there, but you can purchase your tickets there. Save a couple $100, and that would be great. So without further ado, Gerald, let's get into this interview. I'm excited to have you on. I've got some great questions for you that I'm excited to hear. So this is going to be a learning experience for me and the audience because, like I said, we just met a couple days ago on Facebook. I got on the phone with you and I'm like, man, I got to get this guy on our podcast. Sounds like an incredible human being. So before we get into any of these questions, for those people who don't know who you are, please do a favor and introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and a little bit of your experience, how long you've been doing that.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I've been interested in real estate for so many years, but in 2003, got into the mortgage business, and I had a number of clients that were real estate investors, and by seeing their financials and books, I realized I was on the wrong side of real estate, and that I needed to switch over to becoming a real estate investor. So in 2006, I did that, and I bought my first property, and I lucked out in some ways because on that first property that I offered to purchase, I had a competing buyer that also put in an offer on the property. And the seller of the property actually accepted my offer, and then he also accepted the other person's offer as well. And he ended up calling me and saying, hey, sorry, I won't be able to honor our agreement because I made a deal with somebody else and I took his money as well as your money. So I go, all right, look, I go, you can't do that. You know, we have a deal. He goes, well, you can sue me if you want, but I already did it. So I go, all right, well, give me the number, name a number of the guy that you made a deal with. And it ended up being his doctor with his own practice. And I met with him, and it turns out he's a really successful real estate investor of many years, like 30 years or something like that. So he asked me, how many deals have you done? As if he kind of had an inkling of how new I was to the business back then.
Right.
And I told him really proudly, this is my first one, you know, and he started laughing really hysterically. And I was like, what's so funny? And he goes, nothing. He goes, I'll make you the deal of a lifetime. He goes, we can use my money, my resources, my workers, my contractors, everything. I'll take care of everything A to Z. All you have to do is just pay attention, and I'll split the profits with you 50-50. And I was like, wow, that's a great deal. You got yourself a deal. And we shook on it right away. And so I was fortunate. I had a mentor by default on my first deal that really walked me through a lot of the basics of how to properly invest in real estate and some of the things to look out for. So it's kind of interesting nowadays because for the last 12 years, I've really just been in the grind, in that zone where I've just been just getting it. And now 12 years later, I'm realizing that I need to pay back and give back to those that are still trying to learn this business, as opposed to trying to keep things to myself and our own company as trade secrets or intellectual property. Now I'm realizing that there's so much more value in giving back in the same way that I received a lot of this information.
Man, that's awesome stuff. So you had a mentor from the get, which is something that a lot of people miss out on, and that's incredible. So, and was that when you found that person, was that 2006?
Yeah, that was in 2006, early 2007. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you guys kind of know where we're going to go next. So Gerald, having said all this, Gerald actually got to go through a very interesting time period with real estate investing, which was the previous recession. So that was between 2006, 2008-ish. So the first question I have for you is to talk about your experience with going through that recession. Maybe some things when we were on the phone, you talked about some things that you had learned and whatnot. So first, tell us about your experience going through that, some things that you went through, and then, obviously you made it out alive because you're doing real estate investing today. So some things that you learned that you could pass on to other people.
Yeah. So with that, my first deal being done, and I made like $37,000. I decided to I was single back then. And so I hopped on a plane and flew out to Dallas, Texas, and ended up buying my first foreclosure property out there. Then I bought another property out there in Dallas, rented a pickup truck, went to Home Depot and bought thousands of dollars worth of tools and just fixed everything myself and hired a few people here and there for some of the more difficult. But then threw it on the market, sold it, and then flew back to Washington here. And it worked out so well that I went to some of these other markets like Las Vegas, and then a couple hours south of Las Vegas, there's a resort town called Lake Havasu, Arizona. And I bought a ton of properties out there, and I didn't realize that there was such a thing as the peak of the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're brand new.
That's how
Yeah.
I was. I didn't see it coming at all. And so I was just buying properties. I was making deals every day. And so I bought all these properties. I ended up at the end of 2007 with 27 houses in 4 different states.
In 4 different states. Wow.
Yeah.
And was one of them California?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I ended up being caught in a position where the values kept coming down lower and lower and lower as I went to go sell some of these properties. And I was going over to
Yeah.
My mentor never prepared me for anything like that.
Sure.
So I ended up just having to deal with each paper cut one at a time, and trying to find solutions for some of these properties that seemed like the only way to go was foreclosure from there. And so we've over the years now that I feel fortunate to have gone through that, because in some ways, a lot of others that are just now coming into the business in the last few years, that there's an incredible amount of information that I gained through that experience that you can only get through experience.
Sure.
But I feel like there's a lot of creative ways of doing real estate that I learned through that process. So, for example, after the wake of 2007, going into 2008 and 2009, a lot of the banks just stopped lending.
Right.
Even if you had great credit and great collateral, they just stopped lending back then because they were really nervous. I mean, there was the loss, the amount of defaulted loans, and so after that, it became difficult. It wasn't like anybody could just walk into a bank and get a loan like they could just a year or two before that.
Sure.
So that's where we started coming across some methods such as owner financing, subject to financing, where we leave essentially the existing financing in place, or leave that equity in place, and simply provide payments and a return of interest on that investment for that party. And that way, it prevented us from having to go out and get a traditional conventional loan, or to use hard money or private money with the down payment money that you need. Also the points, the origination points and fees that are charged on a loan can typically, eat into your profits and make an investment more costly. So finding these new creative methods of something that has stuck with us over the years, and we still utilize these methods to this day.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, that's very interesting. So you said you had properties in 4 states, correct? And you got foreclosed on half of them, on all of them, some of them?
Ultimately, I transitioned out of all of them.
Okay.
Some of them were foreclosed on, others were just voluntarily given back. And then other ones we held on to for many years before the equities came back and the values came back, and then we ended up ultimately selling those.
Gotcha. And these properties that you have, were they buy and holds, so you had tenants in them?
Yeah, some of them we had they were for buy and hold, and then others were for the buy and flip model. It just we approach each property differently. There's so many things that you can look at. I mean, we have a checklist as far as just the physical conditions of the property that we look into, but depending upon what other comparable properties around are looking like. For example, if there's properties that are selling and they're in high demand, then typically we're going to approach that property from an equitable perspective of looking to fix it and sell it. But if that's not the case, or if the rental market is strong and in high demand, or if it's in an area that we know is going to appreciate over time, then we look at a property as a buy and hold.
Interesting. Yeah. Right. Okay. So going through that period, so that recession period where all this happened, did you kind of take a break from real estate, or did you just push on through it and just continue to do real estate? And then, obviously it got better gradually over the past few years, but so what was the situation with that?
Yeah, I never got out of real estate. I stayed with it. I did transition. So instead of focusing on acquisitions so much, what we ended up transitioning into was vacation rentals. And regular rentals. So we would take, a house that's in an area where maybe people that are traveling to the area might want to visit. For example, I had a house in Seattle that had views of downtown and views of the facility that the Seahawks rehearse at and practice at and everything. And so that property worked time as a vacation rental. We also had a house in Huntington Beach, California that was close by the beach, so that worked out well. A lot of people want to visit there. Same with the home that we had in Maui, Hawaii. It was right by the beach within walking distance, so it really made sense to just operate that as a vacation rental for the period of time that we did. We did that for about 5 years. Now, for anybody listening out there that has had any experience with doing Airbnb or VRBO or any vacation rentals, it's really intense.
So let's talk about that then. So let's talk about that because that's one of my questions here. It's towards one of my last questions, but let's talk about the Airbnbs and vacation rentals. So what are some things that you think has worked for you and that people like? Should people do more Airbnbs? I'm sure you're about to go into that, but let's go ahead and talk about that and go deeper.
Yeah, so many people think that, just about any home can be rented out on Airbnb, but there really is, you have to have that demand. So it has to be in an area that's desirable, perhaps close to a major land, or something that has amenities like views, or you have a pool or a spa, or you have something like that. Or you have the ability to sleep a ton of people in that house. Like you have bunk beds in the rooms so you can sleep 10 people. And people are always looking for stuff like that. Other properties that are, just average and don't really have any features that stand out, those properties don't really get a whole lot of demand on vacation rental sites. But once you've figured out that your property has demand, and then it's a matter of setting it up right. So you almost have to have some of the complaints that we received over the years were for properties where we had too many things in the closets or the cabinets. There wasn't enough room for people to kind of feel at home, or we had too many things to personalize it. It's kind of like behind me in the picture.
Sure.
Too many cluttery things, and if a home has too many things like that, someone's not going to be able to feel at home, right? So there's that, but it's really, it can be a really daunting business to be in, the vacation rental business. You do have people from all walks of life that are going to be visiting and staying at your properties, and that comes with people that have problems too. Sure. So we've had everything from difficulties with the police having to kick people out because they were throwing a party that got way too rowdy and out of control. We've had people that have destroyed portions of the house and put holes in the wall and broken things all over the place. But then we've also had someone that accidentally set fire to the inside of one of our properties.
Wow.
Because they had a candle burning and they put it in the windowsill, and the drapes just blew right over it and went up in flames and fully engulfed the room. So it's
so you just gotta be prepared for that stuff to happen. Like hope for the best and prepare for the worst. Sure. Yeah.
So and one of the things that most people don't think about in that business is that it's all operated by an app, and the way that app works typically is those that are quickest to respond and have the best ratings or guests, those are the folks that end up higher in the search rankings for the results, right? So they get more bookings. Now, if you're the type of person that doesn't want to respond to a message at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're probably not going to do well in the business. Sure. So, because they typically give you the first hour, you're supposed to reply within 1 hour. And you get a lot of international travelers, right? So you get people from different time zones that it's lunch hour over there, even though it's 3 o'clock in the morning over here where you're at, right?
Sure.
So being able to respond to those in a timely manner and staying on top of it, having extra insurance to cover against any losses, these are all things that really make that game work. And so for us, we did it 5 years, and then I said, that's enough for me.
Gotcha. So you currently don't do Airbnb?
Currently, we don't. We've considered getting back into it. I wouldn't do it at the scale that I did. We had 9 properties going at the same time, and so it was a lot of coordinating.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have somebody that's going to be able to clean your properties and turn
Right.
it over for the next guest, changing all the linens and washing everything. And then when something goes wrong, you need to have a handyman that you can call on to come and fix something. There's all these systems that you have to have set up for it to work. And ultimately, when the equities came back strong just a few years ago, I decided to get out of that game and back into the direct investing in real estate.
Gotcha. Okay. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I totally agree with like everything that you said. So, you know, our president of Good Success, Tom Olson, who you've yet to meet yet, but at some point you will. He's actually on vacation right now, but so he has several Airbnbs that are in our area. So like Gary, Indiana, like people actually do rent Airbnbs in Gary, Indiana, folks. Like it's happening. So, but like everything that you said totally makes sense. And even personal experience for me is on my honeymoon a couple months ago, I actually went to Iceland and we did Airbnb the entire way around the Iceland. And I'll tell you this, that what you said about communication. So we've had property managers on here that talk about communication between, yes, your investors and the property manager, but also the property manager and the tenants. And I think it could be the same concept with Airbnb, where if you're a host on Airbnb and you have people that are going to stay at your place, you have to be willing to communicate. And like you said, like you have people that are coming overseas that are international, that it's a different time zone for them. So they may be at lunch, but you're asleep, and you have to be willing to respond to that. I mean, you know, people in Iceland are on totally different, they're 6 hours ahead of where we're at right now. And I was talking to them, you know, they were responding. And I'll tell you one thing too, is specifically about the actual decor and getting the place prepared, is the best place that I stayed were the least cluttered, like the least decorated, the simplest places. It's easier to keep it clean. And you know, you really saw that, and the places that really went overboard and made it feel like a home, that kind of thing. I just felt like some of the stuff just wasn't clean, and you know, I don't know. That's just personal experience, but I totally agree with everything you said. So glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, there are a lot of different types of hosts out there and different properties that they have. Some are and everybody has a different idea of what clean is, right? Mm-hmm. So we since we were hosts, we actually, my wife and I, whenever we've traveled, we've always ever since we first started staying at vacation rental properties, we've kind of been addicted, because once you stayed in someone else's home and you have access to a kitchen and a washer dryer and things like that, it's really difficult to go back to a hotel where you don't have amenities. And so
absolutely,
we love staying in different vacation rental properties, but it is true that they're not all at the same level of cleanliness or organization or set up the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's plenty of resources out there for you guys to be able to learn how to do Airbnbs properly. But yeah, these are obviously some things that Gerald's gone through, that he experienced, and he's like, here's the red flags. Make sure you take this into consideration. So make sure you guys listen to that. Let's transition into your market. So when I was on the phone with you, you mentioned that you don't do very much of your real estate investing in your specific geographical location. But let's talk about your market specifically, Seattle market. What's the market like? What works, what doesn't work? Is there high inventory? Just tell us a little bit about your area.
Yeah. So over the years, it's true that I spent a lot of time traveling and looking at other markets and going after opportunities that were outside of my local geographic area here. But over the years now, the last couple of years in particular, my wife and I, we have a young child at home. And so that really, over the last couple of years, we've really been trying to stay local and stay close to home. And now with another one on the way coming soon here in January, I'm staying local more than ever. And so we've been really focused on our local market here. We've done a number of investments over the last couple of years here, and it's been really exciting over the last two years. The demand exceeded inventory big time.
Sure.
So there was such a difference between the supply and demand of what was available that the prices up here were skyrocketing. So you could invest in a property and you could screw the whole thing up and you would still make a ton of money off of it.
Sure.
It's very interesting to note that has definitely changed over the last 6 months here. What used to be you can't lose kind of market is become a volatile and risky market where many folks are having a hard time understanding what is this property actually worth. And so we, as a business, acquisition business of real estate, so we buy houses all the time. We do lots of marketing and advertising to get motivated sellers to contact us so that we can help them with buying their property from them at the price that they're looking for. But part and parcel of that business is wholesaling. And the reason why is that allows us to continue to keep the marketing machine going, even when we have plenty of deals already on our plate for the month. So if we have enough that, we have too many now, we don't need any more, the phone is still ringing. And so we need to do something with that. We need to monetize that so that we can take that money and keep spending it to keep that whole cycle going, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So for a real estate investor, wholesaling is almost a fundamental from our perspective.
Right.
One of the challenges that has been with the market changing the way it has over the last 6 months here locally is that a lot of our partners that we've wholesaled properties to over the years are suddenly having difficulties where they're not buying anymore because some of the properties that they've bought, invested in to flip and put back on the market, they're still sitting on the market unsold.
Yeah.
So these guys haven't been able to recoup their funds to re-up on another property. And so now we're finding that, okay, the demand has certainly gone down. Inventory, of course, in our market quadrupled from what it was just 1 year ago. It's amazing the difference a year can make. And so all of these things combined have now forced us once again to pivot and change our business. And part of that is coming up with more creative going back to some of the creative ways that we've done business in the past, to give a little bit more of a margin to the profit, you know what I mean, for our investors and our partners. So, but in addition to that, it's now been for us to be opening up to other markets, including the marketing and advertising that we're doing to other markets so that we can help connect profitable properties with our investors, but also to take some of those and connect them with other partners that are outside of our network.
Sure, absolutely. And I totally agree. I think a lot of people that have gotten into real estate investing use wholesaling as the gateway into real estate investing. It's by far the easiest thing. It's very teachable, very learnable from somebody that's just jumping into real estate investing. So I couldn't agree with you more. But I was actually going to mention, if wholesaling is pretty popular right now, but products not moving in the market, then wouldn't it back it up if, for the fix and flippers, the people you're actually wholesaling to? And you answer the question there. That makes that it at some point it's got to break, because if the fix and flippers that are retailing the houses can't dump those, they can't get rid of them, and they're sitting on the market, then for the wholesalers, it's going to clog up at some point too. So,
and we've reached that point now, and it's funny. Wholesaling, I heard it referred to recently as the gateway drug to real estate investing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's totally true.
But so one of the things that we're looking at now, that a lot of our partners are looking at now, is instead of looking at real estate from an equity perspective, in other words, what is it worth after I fix it up, and what can I get for it when I sell it? A lot of our partners are now looking at real estate from an income perspective. And this is something that happened back in 2008, 2009, when the market crashed. Nobody knew what anything was worth. We now approach property from an income perspective. So we're able to say that if this property is going to bring in X amount of dollars in rent, and the amount, our expenses, including mortgage and everything, are less than this, and it provides that cash flow that's left over each month, that cash flow amount is the value of the property.
Right. No, absolutely.
So we can annualize that. You can project it out for years to come, because those things aren't going to change. On a 30-year fixed mortgage, that mortgage payment's never going to go up, right?
Yeah.
And generally speaking, the rents in most markets don't ever come down, at least not too much. You have to have some sort of significant stimulus to cause the rents to really, really come down. I mean, so in a market, for example, where you have a ton of new units coming on board, like new condo buildings or a whole new miles of developments of new houses. Things like that can really affect it. But short of those things, generally speaking, rents stay the same.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
And when we're experiencing some other stimulus in this market right now, like interest rates being driven up by the Federal Reserve, that makes affordability for a mortgage a little bit more difficult, which drives more people over to renting a house instead of buying a house.
Yep.
So that creates more demand for the inventory, the rental inventory that's in place. So it makes buying and holding rentals much more attractive than it was in years past. Compared to buying and flipping properties, right?
Yeah, so I was going to ask you that. Is that something that you're trying another strategy that you're actively going after is buying holds now because the retails aren't moving as much as they were before, should create a rental market, right? And then, the property, Tom Olson, president of Good Success, often says that the property doesn't know that that it's going through a recession or it's going through a market change. So rents are going to stay pretty similar. I mean, it might be different in your market, but in our market, the Midwest, rents didn't change very much during the recession. But so is that a strategy that you're going after now, is the buy and holds because of all that?
Yeah, we're transitioning with all of our investor partners over to buy and hold products as opposed to buy and flip products.
Yeah.
There's just too much risk in flipping products. Get a great deal on one, that's one thing. And if you have partners that need to exit their money and liquidation is the only way to do that, that's still fine. But as a general practice, it is not the best thing out there right now. And the best thing out there, recently I met with someone who's very successful in real estate, and I was introduced to an acronym that represents a concept that I had understood for many years but failed to practice. And that acronym is BRRRR, B-R-R-R-R. And so many of your listeners, I'm sure, have heard of that acronym. Yeah. It stands for buy, rehab, refinance, rent, and repeat, or rent, refinance, and repeat. Mm-hmm. And the idea here is that you leave some of your profits into the property as equity through the refinance instead of taking it all out by selling the property. And by doing that, you're actually saving on capital gains taxes, but you're also continuing your ownership of the property so that the values that it gains over time, over appreciation, that's the wealth that you get to keep. All of these properties over the years that many of us real estate investors have from flipping, we missed out on all the gains that we could have had over the years, right? Yeah. But in addition to that, now it's all about cash flow. Because I missed out on a lot of that too. By keeping these properties, even if you only have $500 a month in cash flow coming from one property, that's for 30 years or even longer than that. You're getting that money forever. Yep. So when you annualize that, times it by 12 months and how many years, I mean, how hard would you have to work to make that same amount of money? And so we're starting, a lot of us have now set goals for ourselves to acquire a certain amount of doors that would provide that cash flow each and every month and give us these assets to hold on to for a long period of time. And all of our partners now, we're all in agreement that the properties we're looking at to do this, we have our buy and hold set for a 10-year hold. And there's a good reason for that too. A lot of purchases, whether you're talking about multifamily properties or single family, a lot of the partnerships and joint ventures that come together to purchase the property have an exit strategy that would be to refinance and cash out some of the investors in 5 years, right? Typically. The problem with that in today's age is that you have interest rates that are going up. They're probably not going to come back down anytime soon. And because of some of these other stimulus that's going on and pressures on what a property is actually worth, refinancing in 5 years from now may not be viable. But yet there's some other strategies that are viable in buying and holding and just planning to leave the money there for 10 years. That way, not a worry about that. But there's also another program that a lot of folks are getting into right now, which is the Opportunity Zones program, as part of the tax reform that President Trump signed into law, where there are these zones that are set aside in every state, city, county of the country that are and don't have a whole lot of economic activity going on. And by investing in these areas and leaving your money there for 10 years, the capital gains associated with those investments are waived. You're not paying them.
Right.
And so this is a huge upside for an investor, because we have to pay capital gains on everything, pretty much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great conversation there. I love that. That was some very valuable information. And good to hear kind of your strategy. And it seems like so you're in Seattle, Washington. I've had a guy on here on the podcast who I interviewed. His name's Chris Prefontaine, and he's in Rhode Island. So total opposite of the country. And he's even said and mentioned the same things that you're mentioning now. So it's very interesting to see the huge difference in the markets, but still similar things that are going on. So let's go ahead. But before we move on, though, one thing that I know is a fleeting question in everybody's mind right now, you being in Seattle, is the Starbucks coffee any better in Seattle than it is anywhere else in the country?
That's a great question. I think Starbucks is a very interesting business to look at because they have such loyal followers.
Oh, absolutely.
So the question has always been, do they treat that coffee with some sort of a, chemical or drug that makes people really want it? To me, it tastes like every other coffee out there. And I think there's a lot of other people that say the same thing. But you wouldn't be able to tell by looking at any Starbucks up here in Washington. They have them nearly on every city block, and they always have a line going out the door, or out the drive-through, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So they're still in high demand. They're one of those businesses, it seems, that they can't screw up.
Oh, absolutely. They built such high loyalty over the past few years. It's incredible. So I just had to ask that question because Emily's a Starbucks drinker, so she's sitting right here. She's my producer. And I had to ask this question. But so let's talk about some things that you've changed. So we're coming down to the end of the podcast here. Been on here for about 40 minutes or so. So it's been a great interview here that we've had with you, Gerald. So I appreciate it. But let's talk about virtual wholesaling. So obviously we just talked about the Seattle market and things that you're possibly having to change in your business and are already making changes. You've talked about how you've been in other states and, from Hawaii, California, Nevada, Arizona, all these other states that are on the West Coast. So first of all, for those of the people, so I've done personal wholesaling from here in Northwest Indiana and Michigan. So it's not that far. Also Ohio a little bit, but still not that far. But you've stretched out a little bit of a big distance. So for the people that don't know, first go into explaining what virtual wholesaling is. It's pretty self-explanatory, but maybe so skim over it. And then, why you do it. So some things that you've seen that really work and why you still do virtual wholesaling.
Yeah, thanks. So let's back up, I guess, real quick and talk about what wholesaling is and make a clear distinction there, because wholesaling is simply a term that's used to describe a process where somebody enters into purchase a property and then they assign the rights that they have in that contract or assign that contract to another buyer to close on it. Now, there's a lot of people over the years that have gone out there and just tied up a property with never having the intention to purchase it, but then they go off and try to offer to other people. And I will say to those people that what you're doing is illegal
and wrong and unethical.
Be really careful that you don't get in trouble, because next thing you know, somebody can sue you over that kind of stuff or get you in trouble with the law. So it's important that when we're entering into these contracts that we have every intention on purchasing the property, or that we have at least enough knowledge to know that one of our partners is going to purchase the property. Putting aside whether it's legal or not, it's really kind of unethical to tie somebody's property up, and meanwhile they're paying the costs of that property, of owning it, whether we're talking about a mortgage or utilities or whatever, during that period of time for someone who's a rookie or a novice to maybe come back and say, yeah, sorry, I can't close, and then they cancel. And so but virtual wholesaling is something that's really interesting and very different, especially for our team. When we are working with a homeowner, a seller, and we're talking to them about buying their property, we take as much time as we need to talk to them about what their situation is and what their goals are, what they're looking to accomplish. This is in contrast to a number of investors out there that'll just go, hey, how much will you sell it to me for? You know, or how about if you sell it to me for this? And they jump right to it, which is, you know, it really doesn't seem right. It's kind of like walking up to, you know, a woman and asking her to sleep with you without even ever getting to know them, you know. So we take the time to get to know our seller, find out what they're looking for and what their goals are. And then we take the time to meet with them at the property. We evaluate the house. We take at least 100 photos of every property that we visit, of every defect and every great part of the property too, all the great features it might have. That way, when we go back to the office and we sit down, we analyze the property for the condition that it's in, the location that it's in, the amenities it has, the downsides that it has, including repairs that it might need. Now we're able to look on the market at some of the other properties that have sold, and we're able to arrive at an accurate value of what the property is worth. That way we can also arrive at what our offer would look like. By taking this information now back to the seller and showing them all of this, we've been very effective at making deals with a large percentage of the people that we talk to. Virtual wholesaling.
So quick question here. So quick question here. When you have, you know, the pre-looks going on, the person taking the pictures, so you guys have boots on the ground in these markets. Is that correct?
Yes.
To assume. Okay, cool. So how did you find these boots on the ground? Did you, you know, obviously you recruited them, but how did you actually find them in these different markets?
Yeah. Acquisition managers are a certain character type.
Yeah.
Personality type.
Absolutely.
You know, they have kind of a sales field, you know, understanding of basic sales, of how that works. But they also are very empathetic and sympathetic and have to take the time to connect and build rapport with that home seller. So when we're talking about virtual wholesaling now, virtual wholesaling is where you're essentially doing the same thing, except for you never visited the property. Mm-hmm. You never went there. You never met the person, the seller in person. And this is where it can get a little bit trickier, because one of the the secret sauce to our recipe in regular wholesaling or even buying homes is meeting with that seller, connecting with them, taking that time before we even talk about price to essentially arrange a transaction. And in many of those situations, we're able to shake on, okay, I'm going to buy your house. Okay, I'm going to sell it to you. We're discussing price. Mm-hmm. That's how magical it can be. But now when we're talking about virtual wholesaling, you don't have that advantage of meeting in person with that seller or even seeing the property for that matter. So this is where we're having to take the time to build rapport with someone over the phone as opposed to in person. But then from there also, we're essentially working on a volume basis. In virtual wholesaling, you're trying to work with a lot of different deals in hopes that you're going to make one, where regular wholesaling, you don't work with many people, but you're closing as many of them as you possibly can. And so virtual wholesaling, you're really doing more of a connection. You have to give yourself a way out of the contract in case things don't end up being what the seller is representing things to be. So that would be like an inspection contingency. Mm-hmm. Where regular wholesaling and our regular acquisitions, we buy properties with no inspection, no closing costs, none of that. Sure. Right? It's kind of a gimmick that we use to be able to buy these properties, but we're also confident that by visiting and touring the property in person, we're going to discover any flaws that it might have that are major, right? Right. In virtual wholesaling, we're not going to be able to do that. So we have to give ourselves a way out in virtual wholesaling, but also we're kind of playing connector of another party as opposed to just working with regular partners that we have in-house. Sure. So now we're going out there, we're finding other buyers to connect with, and essentially we work with the seller to arrive at a price. We get it under contract and get it signed, and then we connect with one of our buyers who will go and look at the property, and to their satisfaction. And as long as everything is good for them, then they sign the assignment for the assignment fee that we receive, and we got ourselves a deal.
Awesome stuff. Well, that's good. So what's been your favorite market to do virtual wholesaling in?
Well, it's only been a few months that we've been going back to virtual wholesaling. I do really like the Dallas and Houston markets right now in Texas. You've got a lot of great guys out there that are very active in their business. They're really easy to work with because they have the experience, they have understanding, and they'll tell you how it is straight up. It becomes difficult sometimes when you're dealing with someone who's maybe wishy-washy, they're not so certain, maybe they're not so experienced,
Right.
maybe they're a little bit nervous, or maybe they don't know how to tell you no.
Yeah.
And they end up tying it up with, well, let me think about it. I'm still looking at it. And versus some of these other guys will take one look and go, nah, that's not for me. Or I'd be interested at a lower price,
They're straight shooters.
Yeah, that's right. So it's much easier working with those guys. And we're seeing a lot of them concentrated in the Houston, Dallas market. But then the Phoenix, Arizona market, you've got a whole nother set of great guys out there that are also doing a great job. They're easy to work with. So I would say all three of those markets are great to virtual wholesale in.
Good stuff. And we know plenty of people that are in the Houston, Dallas, and Phoenix market. So that's good stuff. Yeah. And they are incredible people. So if you're listening right now and you're in those markets, you guys are awesome. We got high five. There you go. Virtual high five, right? We're talking about virtual wholesaling, virtual high five. So we have one more question, and then we're going to round this down to the final round of the podcast. Gerald, it's been awesome. We appreciate you sharing all the stuff that you have shared. So we're going to switch tracks out of virtual wholesaling, out of markets, and all this stuff that we've talked about, Airbnbs. We're going to talk about legacy. So one of the things that you had mentioned when we were conversing over Facebook, and you mentioned that you would like to talk about legacy. So we're always open to that. We've had that topic come up several times on the podcast. So I'm definitely interested to hear what you have to say about it. So first of all, to you, what is legacy, and why is it so important to leave a legacy, and just kind of expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so for many years I was single, more than 10 years. So after years and years of grinding in real estate, I realized that it's great to have the money, it's great to have the assets and everything, but in the end, we're all going to die. Each and every one of us will die one day. It's the one certainty that we can all face in life and know for a fact it's going to happen. And when you think about things like that and what you leave behind, if all you're leaving behind is physical assets, well, those are going to be transferred to somebody else. And once they are transferred to somebody else, they're going to look at it like it's theirs and not yours. And so really, what's the point? Is there any legacy there? And then I've seen others, out there that are so successful that they're able to get their name on as a company name or on the side of a building. And some of those things, okay, maybe now we're getting a little bit closer to a legacy. Doing something great with your life that serves others and that you get recognition for that, now we're talking and getting warmer. But in the end, I found, at least for me personally, that the most rewarding legacy to have is that of having a family and children. My parents, I was fortunate enough to have parents that went out of their way to raise children. And it's interesting because we live in a day and age where to so many people, having children and a family is not important, and it's not critical to them, and it's a lot of work, and why go through all that when it's so much work? And I have to agree with them in many ways. It's really a lot of work.
Yeah.
When you have, especially the younger ones, that you have things like diapers and screaming in the middle of the night where they're waking you up, and you're losing sleep literally over this stuff. That's some of the real sacrifice, and it continues on. We have teenagers as well that are in high school, and wow, sometimes the attitude and feedback that we get back from them.
Sometimes they scream more than the babies did.
Yeah, sometimes it's unbearable, and you're like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But there are those times where, especially when they're little, and they come up and they throw their arms around you, and they're just so thankful for you being there and providing them for this. And it's almost like, even though they're young enough that they can't talk yet, it's almost as if they're able to say things to you that even put into words. And it's just such a magical feeling to know that even after, and I have children that are fully grown now in their 20s, and seeing them live a successful life, where they're happy and they're doing something, man, that's the real reward. That's the legacy. Even after I'm long gone and dead, my children in our family, they will remember me, and they will be able to say that what they have it came from the sacrifices that I made, and so it's really important to build some sort of a legacy for your life so that you have that value that goes far beyond any wealth, riches, money, or assets can ever deliver.
Yeah, that's great stuff. And I think that's one of the things that is a question in a lot of people's minds is how do you balance the work life? Like what's the difference between legacy and your business and, impacting others as opposed to your family and your close friends and stuff like that. And I think that's something that every individual is going to have to find out on their own. There's not a secret answer. There's not a secret sauce to this, right? So for me personally, I just got married, so I'm stepping into this life now. And so I thank you very much. But yeah, I'm stepping into this life now and things are a lot different. I shouldn't say I'm not allowed. I'm not able to hustle as much as I was before, where I'm working till midnight, working from 8 a.m. till midnight some days and, just grinding it out as much as I can. Like you even mentioned, now I got a wife to take care of that wants my attention, that needs my attention, that wants to, be with me and just, relax or watch movies or go out on dates, stuff like that. And I got to make sure I pay attention to that because I'm leaving a legacy with her and then my future children as well. So totally agree with all that. That's awesome.
Yeah, there really is a balance to it. And sometimes it's difficult. Other times it's easy. A schedule certainly helps.
Oh, yeah.
But, not everybody can have children or a spouse even, and so I in touching on that really quick, it's not that's not the only way to build a legacy. Mm-hmm. Really, the key to building a successful legacy is helping other people at any cost. And I heard somebody say it once that the best measure of that is whether or not in your daily life you're doing things that you never tell anybody about, that you never seek recognition for, that is in the benefit of somebody else that you get zero benefit from. And if you're doing things like that in your life on a daily basis, then that is a successful legacy, no matter how you slice it.
That's great stuff. And that's going to lead us into our final round here. I think that was incredible. I love that. And 1,000% agree with it. That's great stuff. So good success for us. These are the last two questions that we got for you. So good success for us means a lot. It comes from the Bible, Joshua 1:8, and talks about the quality of the success as opposed to the quantity. So I'm not sure if you were able to prepare yourself for this. I sent you these questions ahead of time, so I'm very interested because you're brand new, introduced to us. You've not been around us or anything. So, it's not about us, but about the term good success. So when you hear good success, what comes in mind for you?
Well, I think it really ties into what we were just talking about a little bit. I guess the first thought I would have is to try and define what bad success is. Somebody can be very successful in their business and make lots of money, but if it was at what cost, at what expense, right? How did they go about doing that? Was there anything that was devious in how they, or that that hurt somebody else along the way? Or are you experiencing success because, in a way that you're uplifting other people around you, you're taking other people with you, you're sharing your knowledge with other people? To me, those are the things that really make good success, or that make success that's worthwhile and long lasting,
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. All right. That's some good stuff. So I figured that would tie into the legacy thing. So that was a perfect segue there. All right. So this is the last thing that we got, and then we're going to let you guys go. We're going to let Gerald go. We've had him on here for a while, but it's been a great interview. Definitely appreciate everything that you've shared so far. So you got to leave the audience with one thing. So whether it's a quote, a piece of advice, a book that you've read that's helped you a lot, or a thought, or whatever it is, one thing that you would leave the audience with, what would that be?
Recently I was asked about how my wife and I, who's a licensed real estate broker and I'm an investor, how we're able to work together. And we've been working together for a number of years now daily in our business. and how we also are able to keep our relationship together and close. And the answer that I have to that is to say, to keep it 100. You have a lot of couples that approach a relationship from the perspective that it's a 50-50 relationship, that, well, I'll take care of my half and you take care of yours. But the reality for me has been that if I'm putting everything I have into that relationship and she's putting everything she has into it, so 100, 100, then together on a good day, we have a 200%, relationship.
Yeah.
And on a bad day, we might have 150.
Yeah.
But in relationships where each party's only putting in 50% or half, on a good day, you might have a great relationship. But on a bad day, what's going on and what does that look like? Is it where, each side is biting at each other's back and snapping and snarking at each and everything that they don't like? Or are they going to be a little more forgiving because of all the other things that were contributed over time? And so really keeping it 100, keep it 100 and invest in your relationships like you do in real estate, and you'll be well off.
Great stuff. And that, so that for the first thought that you had there, so the keeping it 100% and, giving 100%. The first time I actually heard that concept was in The Compound Effect, written by Darren Hardy. So that, some great stuff. He mentions that. And first time I heard that, I'm like, but that doesn't make any sense. How does that make any sense doing only 50% or doing 100% as opposed to, you want a 100% relationship, right? So there's a lot of circles in there, but I love it. So if you guys haven't read that book, but that incredible stuff's there. So Gerald, we appreciate you being.
I think I have it right here.
Oh, there it is. Yes, that is. Yes, awesome stuff. That's one of my favorite books. I saw you looking around for something. I figured that's what you were looking around for.
Yeah,
so I wanted to give you some time.
I just have it sitting right there.
Yeah, so great stuff. Keep it 100. Okay, so Gerald, we appreciate you being on the podcast today and appreciate you sharing everything that you have. Before we let you go, if somebody wanted to get in contact with you and maybe learn more about you, what would be the best way for them to contact you? Maybe your website or an email address that you would be willing to give out to the show today?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time on Facebook, so you can look me up there, Gerald Allen Hennessey, or you can go to our website, which is BentleyKensington.com. And we also have another website if you know of anybody that's looking to sell a house to us, and that's MaximumCashOffer.com.
All right, awesome stuff. So MaximumCashOffer.com. If you guys are in the Dallas, Houston, Arizona markets, make sure you guys, shameless plug here, so make sure you guys take advantage of that. So awesome stuff. Gerald, thank you so much for being on the show today. Look forward to building our relationship with you and having you back on the show again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Josh, for having me.
All right. That's going to do it for today's episode. We appreciate you jumping on and listening to this show today. If you guys haven't already, make sure you have subscribed to the Good Success Podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or Google Play, all the podcast platforms. So just go to the platform, search up Good Success, and you will find us there. And then the Good Success Mastermind that I already mentioned at the beginning of the show, coming up February 4th through 8 in Dallas, Texas at Quest Trust Company's office. They are being amazing and hosting us there. And that is going to be, once again, February 4th through 8. Incredible group of people that we have had in the mastermind. If you want to learn more about it, go to goodsuccess.com/mastermind to learn more there. And then you got to fill out the application, submit the application so we can learn a little bit more about you. Then we'll jump on a phone call with you, either myself or Tom Olson, president of Good Success. And then the Community Go-Giver event, early bird pricing is going on right now. A lot more details to come out soon. The dates are June 26, 27, 28, but you can save a couple $100 and go purchase your tickets now. That's going to do it for today's episode. We appreciate you jumping on. Remember to be a conduit, not a bucket, and work to have to give. Catch you guys on the next one.